We've seen that God reveals himself in ways that sometimes we may not have thought about. And we have seen that God is very protective of his people, just as we are. He is possessive. He is protective of his people. And that's divine jealousy. That's godly jealousy. That's the good kind. That's what we want. That's what we need. That's what we must have. And we are blessed by God because he's a jealous God over us. He doesn't want anything to take us away from him. Now, on the bad side, there's a word called envy. And we looked at that. That's the bad part, where I want what someone else has. And I'll go to sometimes great lengths to get what other people have. And I'm just eaten up by their successes. And God has told us to stay away from that. As we've seen, he put that in as the very last of the Ten Commandments. You should not envy, covet. You shouldn't covet anything your neighbor has. If you do, that's just seed planted for bad things such as murder, such as adultery, wanting someone else. Seeds such as wanting their goods, so you steal and all that. And we saw how God has told us covetousness is just a work of the devil. Stay away from that. Instead, you love people, meaning you want the best for them and everything for them to work out well. If you do that, you won't be coveting what they have. Now, as we saw last week, God has told us to owe no man anything except to love him. And the whole command to love your neighbor as yourself is sort of summed up in that one word. And we saw where Paul says, if you're content, you'll be happy. If you're content, you'll be a blessing to others. And that comes, as he said, I've learned to do that by the strength of God, to know that his blessings to me are sufficient. Whether I think they're good or bad, God's blessings are sufficient to make me satisfied in whatever state I'm in. All right, we're going to go now to Deuteronomy chapter 4. If you got your Old Testaments, Deuteronomy chapter 4, down at the bottom of your page, there is where we'll be. And we'll see how God works out this idea of being a jealous God a little bit more. We know the Ten Commandments are pretty short and sweet. Bing, 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 bing. And then a lot of the rest of the first few books of the Bible are to explain the Ten Commandments a little bit better. Our word Deuteronomy, it's a long word that we, are not familiar with. But if you look at how words are put together, it sort of explains little things. Now, when we're playing dominoes, and we play the ace, that's one, and we play the tray, that's the three. But what's number two? It's the deuce. Deuce. Well, that's the basic word for Deuteronomy. Deuto, the first part, means two. And aronomy at the end is like a study, like astronomy is studying the stars, or biology is studying life. But this is the second study. This is the second telling of the law. This is the second discussion, Moses would say. Deuteronomy, second time around. But he expands on the Ten Commandments and all of God's laws to the Jews as they were given on Mount Sinai, and for them to be his covenant people. So here we have in Deuteronomy chapter 4, and we'll go through a few of these a little bit as we go. In verse 15, he says, you saw no form of any kind the day that the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire. Okay, what he's talking about that is on the Mount Sinai there, where God came down to give the Ten Commandments and the law to Moses. Remember, he said, don't bring anybody with you. I'll burn them up. They are not to come to this holy mountain. And Moses came and he received the law. But you see, God has never revealed himself visually to anybody fully. We couldn't handle that. One time, Moses was shown the backside of the glory of God, because God said, you cannot live if you see me. His glory has been so special that he has never fully revealed his we would say his face or his front side to man. God says here, verse 15, he says, when I gave the law, you didn't see me. And part of that was on purpose so that you will not think you need to make idols to represent what I look like. I don't want anybody to see what I look like, that is, in a human form. Of course, God is a spirit. He says, so you will not make an idol. He goes on to say, therefore watch yourselves very carefully. Verse 16, and he says, so that you don't become corrupt and make for yourselves an idol, image of any shape, whether man or woman or animal or anything that flies in the air, any creature and all like that. And verse 19, when you look up to the sky to see the sun, the moon, the stars, don't bow down and worship them. Go on down